Hello, welcome back for our second microeconomics videos under chapter 1. In the previous, we have discussed a basic concepts of macroeconomics, the goals of macroeconomics, the reason we study microeconomics, matters of microeconomics, which includes cultural literacy, self-interest, civic responsibility, and also historical perspective of microeconomics. Today, we are going to see the left one under the same chapter. According to Blanchard, among the steady accumulation of knowledge that took place over this period, that means the previous period we have discussed, it is possible to identify number of examples of steady accumulation of knowledge. The first one is improvements in availability of economic data in developing system of national accounts. Economics gets better at collecting and organizing data about the economy. National account track a country's total income, spending, production, and the like. This helped economists understand the economy in clear and more organized ways. The second steady accumulation of knowledge is the developments of and the improvements in econometric methods in more detailed modeling of the behavioral relationship of the variables. Sorry. Econometric methods are statistical tools used to analyze the economic data. Over time, these methods become more advanced and accurate. This allowed economists to build better models to explain how different economic actors are related. The third one is construction of microeconometric models of the economy. Economists created a large, detailed mathematical models representing the whole economy at one. This model simulates how different parts of economy interact. They help policymakers predict the effect of different economic policy. The fourth one is incorporation of expectation augmented flips curves or flips curve analysis into macroeconomic models and the examination of implication for stabilization policy. For example, Milton Friedman. Under this, the flips curve originally showed an inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. As you know, flips curve explains that as inflation increase, unemployment rate decrease. That is because if inflation increase means if money in supply increase, that means if money in supply increase, investment also increase. If investment increase, production increase or output increase. As output increase, the opportunity of job is occurred or created or job opportunity is occurred. Because of that, the inflation and unemployment rate has opposite relationship or inverse relationship. This is not for a long period of time. Rather, it is for a short period of time. In long period of time, the opposite is true. That means if inflation is increased, unemployment rates also increase. Why? Because of different cases. If, for example, an individual expects that inflation is increased, those individuals try to increase their wage rather than increasing the production or outputs. Inflation only is increasing if money supply increasing in the long run. So this is how this trade-off is uh, violated. Those and other issues will be raised in the future, how they are related to each other. This has relationship also with production. If money in circulation is increased, actual GDP is increased or real GDP is increased. This is resulted in increasing of employment or increasing of job opportunity, occurrence of job opportunities. That's why unemployment rate is decreasing, inflation is increased. But as we increase money in circulation, the inflation is increased, but not GDP or not real output increase because of different cases. Because of different cases, that case will be explained in the future. The expectation augmented flip curve includes people's expectation about inflation. For example, a Friedman shows that if people expect inflation, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment changes because of what I've explained before. This trade-off is also violated because of expectation. This influences how economists think about the controlling inflation and unemployment. Because of such expectation, thinking of the economist is affected or violated. The other one is more carefully modeling of how expectations are formed. This is economists started studying how people form their expectation about the future, like inflation or interest rates. They can expect something in the future, then this is important because expectation influence economic decisions, for example, on spending, on saving, and investment. How expectation can affect the decision of individual or consumers, especially consumers' expectation or farmers' expectation. For example, if product of the price, if an individual thinks that in the future the price of the product increase, they purchase or they spend now, or the demand of the, the current market increase, or the demand for the products currently is increased because they expect in the future price be written than they spend now. In opposite, if they think that the price of some products decrease in the future, or they expect as price of some product decrease in the future, they do not spend at this time. So they save their monies rather than spending that areas, and they have side decision, or they decided not to spend or not to invest on some uh, investment areas depending on expectation. For example, if they afraid a policy that affect their investment, they cannot invest now and they change their decision. That is how economic event is going on. The other better model of expectation made economic predictions more accurate. The sixth and the final one is expectations or examination of implication of rational expectations. Rational expectation theory, developed by economists like Robert Lucas, assume people use all available information efficiently to predict the future. They use their expectation to predict what is going to happen in the future. This idea changed how economists view the effects of the government policy. It suggests that if people anticipate policy, those policies may not work as planned. For example, Lucas 976 shows that ignoring how expectation form can lead to wrong conclusion about policy effects. Because if such is not considered, the policy may be in effect because of expectation. However, in contrast, Woodford 2000 argues that the degree to which there has been progress over the course of the century is sufficiently far from transparent, and that microeconomics have been famously controversial. Acknowledging discussion of the 20th century developments in microeconomics make frequent reference to revolution and counter-revolution. Woodford traces the development of microeconomics in historical perspective as follows. What he Starting from the Keynesian 1930 general theory, Woodford track micro progress in microeconomics or pass-through. It is from the Keynesian revolution. What is Keynesian revolution? Let me see some issues about Keynesian revolution. John Maynard Keynes published the general theory of employment, interest, and money in 1936. He challenged classical economics by arguing that total demand or spending drives economic output and employment. He was arguing with these ideas. In times of recession, according to him, government intervention like spending is necessary to boost demand and reduce unemployment. For this, the government is the solution. This is especially in financial crisis during depression. At that time, the solution is the government. He said the solution is the government. For example, it may be in the form of spending that's that uh, that increase the demands or that increase an economic output in the employment, or in during a recession, government intervention like spending is necessary to boost the demand and reduce unemployment. If there is a recession, a solution is a government, because if we increase its expenditure, that is money in circulation or investment is increasing, and the recession, the demand is occurred, and also as unemployment is reduced according to these views. This changed how economists thought about the economic fluctuation in the policies. The second one is neoclassical synthesis or neoclassical combination. What is what was combined? What was combined into this one? And what is neoclassical synthesis? It is an economic theory that combines two important ideas or issues. That is, in short term, active government policy can stabilize the economy, but in long term, the economy naturally moves back to full employment. This is how economy in the long run adjusts themselves or come into equilibrium. This is what stated under that. The other one is the great inflation. Many economists experienced high inflation and high unemployment at that time, at great inflation. This is called in economics stagflation. This contradicts Keynesian prediction, which expects inflation and unemployment to move in opposite direction. That because in long run, economy by itself. In long run, what they said is become wrong. That means, in long run, if we increase money in circulation, GDP or output or actual GDP is not increased, rather it is affected. But inflation is increased, and also that is why all the time the objective of central bank or monetary policy is controlling of inflation or uh, price stability rather than product stability or production stability, because policy cannot influence the production or the output because of such theory. If we increase money in circulation in a short run, the investment increase, GDP or output increase, but it is not for a long run. In long run, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. So all the time, monetary policy or central bank should control money circulation or control inflation rather than controlling GDP, because it is the outcome of different components. GDP is the outcome of different components. For example, potential GDP maybe because of natural resources, because of establishment of new technology, and because of educated human beings or labor. That is because of this. This is not because of policy. So monetary policy should control only inflation, depending on these theories. The other is the failure of Keynesian model to explain this leads to criticisms and search for new theories. The other new theories that criticize in Keynesian economic resulted in the other theories that we have see that criticizing Keynesian economics, monetarism, rational expectation is stated as follows. For example, a monetarist led by Milton Friedman, the monetarist or Friedman emphasized the role of money supply in controlling inflation. According to explanation of monetarist or Friedman, the cause of inflation is central bank says. The cause of inflation is money circulation. So the responsibility or a person or a body that should hold responsible should be responsible is central bank, because if money circulation increase, which is printed by central bank and the flow to circulation, the inflation is also increased. So if you need to decrease money in circulation or inflation, you have to decrease money in circulation. That is what monetarist or um, Friedman said. The other is rational expectation, proposed by Robert Lucas and others, also arguing that people anticipate government policy and adjust their behavior, making some policy ineffective. Because of that, if society or farms or consumers expect about the government policy in the future, they adjust their behavior. Because of that, the policy that made by the government is ineffective because of expectation. If I expect government increase tax in the future on investment, I will not invest because the government can impose tax on me, so I can change my areas from that investment to somewhere other, some other things. That is why expectation affects the behavior of an individual or the decision of an individual and resulted in ineffectiveness of policy, whether it is monetary policy or other physical policy or totally a government policy. The other What's Woodford Tuck was new classical economics, real business cycle theory to neoclassical synthesis to neoclassical synthesis. That is, combines the best insight from Keynesian and also neoclassical approach. This is the combination of both approach become neoclassical synthesis or combination. Uses micro foundation model with rational expectation, but also incorporates price in the wage thickness, slow adjustment. Supports the idea that monetary and the fiscal policy can affect output and the employment in short term. So this framework is behind much modern macroeconomic research and policies. From Woodford's historical perspective, the evolution of economists' thinking on microeconomics has been far is from. In developing countries, microeconomic objective is simply to deal with microeconomic problem such as low income level, which means people do not earn enough money since it is very low, inflation, which is price keep going up or making things more expensive, unemployment, many people do not have job or jobless, the other high interest rates or borrowing money is very expensive because of high cost of capital, trade imbalance, the countries import more than it exports, causing a shortage of foreign money or foreign exchange. For example, especially for different countries, shortage of foreign exchange means that a dollar or pound or euros, this is what's serious problem in most developing countries, including Ethiopia. The other microeconomic data as indicator of economic performance. What does that means? What is economic indicator means? Economic indicator are statistics that measure one or more aspect of microeconomics, such as measuring of aggregate production or total income, like GDP of the country, measures of employment and unemployment, and a measure of inflation, like the percentage change in consumer price index. In microeconomics, data are crucial. Why it is crucial? What is the help of data for microeconomics or microeconomists? Data help policymakers to see what problem needed to be addressed. Depending on the data analysis or by trend analysis, by using different data, policymakers identify the problem based on the previous data or trend data and then address that problem. And also they help microeconomists to identify the theories that make correct prediction. They often reveal interest puzzles that microeconomic theories need to solve. Everything that passes through the economy is priced in the salt. So, economists have quantitative data to work with price, quantities, and the values. Having quantitative data allows economists to do more than many other social scientists because of having this quantitative data. The most important key measurements of microeconomic data variables or indicators in economies are unemployment rates, inflation rates, interest rates, level of stock markets, exchange rates, and the real gross domestic product. Sorry, let we see each of them. What is unemployment rate? First of all, the real gross domestic product or real GDP and unemployment are directly and immediately connected to people's current material well-being. How this is happens and in the form of what? Let we see. If a real gross domestic product or real GDP increase, that means output increase, job opportunities increase. So money unemployed become employed, or there is the occurrence of or happiness of job opportunity. If many of the society laborers are employed, there is increasing of income. If income is increased, your current material well-being is increased or your properties increase. By this way, the real gross domestic product and the unemployment are directly and immediately connected to people's current material well-beings. While the other indicators, other economic indicators are not, but they profoundly influence the economy's direction. Unemployed people who want to work and are actively looking for a job but have not yet found one that they consider. This is unemployed. We say unemployed if they are actively searching of job and currently they have no job but they can't get, that we call as unemployed people. Unemployment rate is equal to number of employed people divided by total labor force times 100. The summation of unemployed plus employed is called as total labor force. This unemployment rate shows the best indicator of how well the economy is doing relative to its productive potential. For example, if unemployment rate is very low, a country use its potential. If unemployment rate is very high, a country do not use its potential. There is underutilization of potential labor force. We can classify as, that means unemployment can be classified in different ways. The first one is fractional unemployment. What kind of unemployment is called as fractional? For example, students that graduate and are searching for a job, for example, did not get for 1 year or 6 months. For that time, that individual is unemployment or unemployed. That unemployment is called as fractional employment. Or to get another new jobs, if there is an employment time, that is known as fractional employment time or fractional employment. The second one is structural employment. What kind of unemployment is structural employment? When job is not matched with skill of that individual, it is structurally unemployed. For example, if new technology is come to the company and that individual or staff cannot apply with that new technology. For example, if he cannot work some data with software, that individual is unemployed. That employment is structural unemployment. The other cyclical unemployment. This is because of economic downturn, especially during recession. We call that is cyclical unemployment. There is a seasonal unemployment. That time, if, for example, harvester, a person or a labor that has a capacity or ability to harvest, can harvest during harvesting time. After that time, that individual is unemployed. This is seasonal unemployment. The other is hidden unemployment or disguised unemployment. This is when a worker work less than what he can or less than his capacity, because there is no job that fits with him. But to get some income, he can do work less than his capacity. That is known as hidden unemployment or disguised unemployment. So one is inflation rates. What is inflation rates? How can we define inflation rate? Inflation rate is the percentage increase in average price level of goods and service over a time, or it's a measure of how fast the annual rate of change over all levels of price in the economy. That is speed of change of price in a year or per year or per month or per quarter. A very high inflation rate, which is called as hyperinflation, more than 20% months, that can causes massive economic destruction. As the prices break down, the possibility of using profits lost to make rational business decisions vanishes. Such episodes of hyperinflation are among the worst economic disasters. This is hyperinflation. There is moderate inflation rate is a little more than 10% a year, should not seriously compromise consumers, investors, and the manager's ability to determine the best use of their financial resources. The other one is misery index. What is misery or misery index or hard index? The sum of inflation and unemployment rates as the measure of how bad, that means measurable, the economy is. This is how can we measure how things. The third one is interest rate. It governs the redistribution of purchasing power across time. Interest rate can be divided into two, that is nominal interest rates and the real interest rates. Nominal interest rate concerns how much money worth of interest borrower must pay to borrow given sum of money for 1 year. The real interest rate concerns how much purchasing power over good and the service a borrower must pay in order to borrow given amount of purchasing power for 1 year. But how can we calculate real interest rates? A real interest rate is equal to nominal interest rates minus inflation. So when we say real interest rates that is adjusted for inflation. Nominal interest rate is an interest rate that do not adjusted for inflation. That is, how can we differentiate interest rates, nominal or real? The difference between two is that nominal interest rates do not take proper account of effective of inflation, while real interest rates do or take into account. A business enterprise who think they can make good use of additional financial resource borrow, promising to return the purchasing power they use today with interest in the future. Whenever the interest rate is low, money becomes cheap. Why it is cheap? Because if interest rate or cost of capital is very low, any person can take from bank or borrow or can borrow from bank and invest somewhere else and get a profit. Or if interest rate is low, investment tends to be high because if you have money, you can invest and the investment is high. This is because business find out a wide range of possible investment projects will generate enough cash to pay their interest on borrowed money. Not only this one, but also if interest rate is very low, borrowers uh, have borrowers have confidence to pay back principal and interest, repay the principal of the loan as they produce profits. The other one is level of stock market, a measure of how companies listed on the stock exchanges are performing via stock index like Standard & Poor, S&P 500 or countries index. Why it is matter? Why level of stock is matter? A rising stock market investor confidence in likely economic growth. Failing stock market concerns about future economic performance, or it is an index of expectation for future. When the stock market is high, investor expects economic growth to be rapid, profit to be high, unemployment to be relatively low. That means if there is high economic movement, that means when stock market is high, that means when there is economic movement, unemployment rate is low because there is high job opportunity. The other one is exchange rate. It is the price of one currency expressed in terms of unit of another currency. And so we can analyze it with tools of supply and demand. Exchange rate governs the terms on international trade and the investment to take place. The nominal exchange rate is the rate at which the money of different countries can be exchanged for one another. That is the rates by which money of one countries or different country can be exchanged for one another. In opposite of that, the real exchange rate is the rate at which the goods and the service, not money or currency, goods and the service produced in different countries can be exchanged for one another. This is the difference between real and nominal exchange rates. The other thing is when domestic currency is appreciated, that means if your country's currency is appreciated in value or the value of your currency is very high, foreign produced goods are relatively cheap for domestic. Because of that, import is increased. Buyers but domestic made goods are relatively expensive for foreigners. Because of this, export is decreased. Then imports are likely to be high and the exports are likely to be low. That is why different countries, including our country, our continent Africa, especially developing countries as a whole, try to depreciate their money and increase their exports. If your country's currency is depreciated, your product values or price is low. Because of this, different world countries can take your products or in the form of exports, and then you get foreign exchange, or your country's foreign reserve is increased because of this one. That's why all the time World Bank and IMF recommend to depreciate your currency and then increase your exports to balance your trade deficits, or to fund your trade deficit, or finance your trade deficits, or to make positive balance of payments, or be then this is how exchange rate is working for one country. I thank you. If you have a comments, please give me your comments. What I have to adjust, whether explanation is short or explanation is more long. And your document, my document is visible or not visible. The logic is not good or good, or the PowerPoint is good or not good. Have a nice time. We will meet in the next time. Thank you.